Sometimes the one who quietly waits outside your door is carrying a secret that can change an entire kingdom. Emily Parker almost dropped the basket of fresh bread when she opened her front door at sunrise. Sitting calmly on the dew-covered grass was the largest black wolf she had ever seen. Its thick midnight fur shimmered beneath the pale morning light, and its silver eyes followed her with quiet patience instead of fear. Emily stood perfectly still, expecting the animal to disappear into the forest the moment it noticed her. It did not move. It simply sat there with remarkable dignity, as though it had been waiting for her to wake. A cool mountain breeze drifted across the tiny cottage, carrying the sweet scent of pine trees and wildflowers through the valley. Birds sang cheerfully from the nearby branches, completely untroubled by the unexpected visitor. Emily slowly set her basket on the porch. "Good morning," she said softly before laughing at herself. "I cannot believe I just greeted a wolf." The great animal tilted its head slightly, almost as though it appreciated her attempt at conversation. Emily smiled despite her surprise. "You are certainly polite." She carefully stepped down from the porch, keeping several feet between them. The wolf remained perfectly calm. There was no growling, no threatening posture, and no sign that it wished to frighten her. Instead, it watched her with gentle curiosity that somehow felt strangely familiar. Emily noticed that the creature looked well cared for. Its thick fur was clean despite spending the night outdoors, and around its neck rested a wide leather collar decorated with a polished silver ornament that reflected the morning sunlight. "You belong to someone," she whispered. "Someone must be worried about you." She glanced toward the forest trail leading to the neighboring villages, hoping to see a traveler searching for a missing companion. The path remained empty. Emily sighed quietly. "Well, I suppose you should not stay hungry while we wait." She disappeared inside her cottage and returned moments later carrying a wooden bowl filled with cool spring water. She carefully placed it several feet away before stepping back. "There you are." The wolf approached without hesitation, lowered its head, and drank slowly before lifting its silver eyes toward her again. Emily smiled warmly. "You are welcome." The simple words seemed to make the animal even calmer. After gathering her basket, Emily began walking toward the village market. She assumed the wolf would remain behind once it finished drinking. Instead, she heard soft footsteps on the dirt path a few moments later. She glanced over her shoulder. The giant black wolf followed several yards behind, never rushing, never crowding her, simply matching her pace with quiet determination. Emily stopped walking. So did the wolf. She took another step. The wolf calmly did the same. "Are you following me?" she asked with an amused smile. The only answer came from a gentle breeze stirring the wolf's dark fur. Emily laughed softly. "You are unusual." By the time she reached the small market square, everyone had already noticed her silent companion. Conversations paused. Shopkeepers leaned over their wooden stalls. Children peeked curiously from behind their parents while older villagers exchanged uncertain whispers. Emily greeted everyone as she always did, purchasing fresh vegetables, flour, and herbs while pretending not to notice the growing crowd watching from a distance. The wolf never left her side. It remained quietly beneath the shade of a large oak tree, observing everything with calm silver eyes. Several curious children slowly approached before stopping a safe distance away. One little boy looked toward Emily. "Does he belong to you?" Emily smiled gently. "I only met him this morning." The children looked even more amazed. "Then why is he following you?" Emily glanced toward the giant wolf. It simply looked back at her with the same peaceful expression. "I wish I knew," she admitted. As the afternoon faded into evening, Emily returned to her little cottage with the mysterious companion still walking a few steps behind. She expected that once darkness settled over the valley, the wolf would finally disappear into the forest where it belonged. Instead, after she quietly closed her front door and looked through the window one last time before bed, the great black wolf calmly circled beneath the old maple tree beside her porch, laid down upon the soft grass, rested its head upon its paws, and closed its silver eyes as though it had already decided exactly where home would be when the sun rose again. Emily Parker woke to the cheerful songs of robins outside her bedroom window and the gentle warmth of golden sunlight spilling across the wooden floor. For a brief moment, she wondered whether the remarkable visitor from the previous day had simply been an unusually vivid dream. She stretched, slipped into her boots, and quietly opened the front door. The giant black wolf immediately stood from beneath the old maple tree, where it had spent the entire night without wandering even a single yard away from her cottage. Dew shimmered across its thick midnight fur, while its silver eyes met hers with the same calm patience as before. Emily smiled without realizing it. "Good morning again," she said softly. "You really stayed." The wolf slowly wagged its broad tail once before taking a few relaxed steps closer, stopping respectfully several feet from the porch. Emily laughed under her breath. "You certainly know your manners." She carried another wooden bowl of cool spring water outside, placing it in the same spot as the day before. The wolf lowered its head and drank quietly before looking back at her with an expression that somehow seemed grateful. "I suppose we should find out where you belong," Emily said. She packed a basket with herbs, bread, and fresh vegetables before setting off toward the forest trails that connected several nearby farms. As soon as she reached the gate, soft footsteps followed behind her once again. She looked over her shoulder with an amused smile. "Of course you are coming too." The giant wolf continued walking several steps behind, never crowding her path, never making a sound louder than the gentle rustle of fallen leaves beneath its paws. Along the winding trail, Emily greeted neighbors tending gardens and repairing fences. Every conversation eventually ended with surprised glances toward her unusual companion. "Emily," an elderly farmer called with wide eyes. "Is that wolf following you again?" She smiled politely. "It appears so." "Does it belong to anyone?" another neighbor asked. Emily gently shook her head. "I have not found anyone searching for him." The wolf simply sat beside the path while the conversation continued, showing no sign of impatience or fear. Its remarkable calm slowly eased the concerns of those watching. By late morning, Emily reached the small river where she often gathered medicinal herbs growing along the banks. She knelt among clusters of wild mint and lavender while carefully placing fresh cuttings into her basket. The wolf rested nearby beneath the shade of a towering oak, quietly watching the flowing water. Every now and then Emily glanced toward him with a smile. "You really enjoy keeping me company, do not you?" The wolf lifted its head at the sound of her voice, its silver eyes bright beneath the dancing sunlight filtering through the leaves. Emily chuckled softly. "I still wish I knew your name." A group of village children soon wandered down the trail carrying handmade fishing poles. The moment they spotted the enormous wolf, they stopped in complete silence. Emily looked up from her basket and smiled reassuringly. "It is all right. He has been nothing but gentle." One brave little girl slowly stepped forward, holding out a tiny wildflower she had picked along the path. The wolf remained perfectly still until she placed the flower beside one enormous paw. Instead of moving away, the great animal lowered its head slightly, almost like a graceful bow. The children burst into delighted laughter. "He likes flowers," one boy declared. Emily laughed with them. "Apparently he does." The peaceful afternoon passed with surprising ease. The children skipped stones across the river while the wolf quietly watched over them from the riverbank. Emily noticed something curious more than once. Whenever anyone wandered too close to the deeper water, the wolf calmly stood and shifted a little closer, never alarming anyone, simply remaining watchful until the child returned safely to shore. There was quiet wisdom in every movement, as though protecting others came as naturally as breathing. As the sun slowly drifted lower behind the mountains, Emily gathered her basket and began walking home once more. The wolf immediately rose and followed at the same comfortable distance it had kept all day. She smiled without turning around. "I suppose asking you to stay behind would not accomplish much." The breeze carried the scent of pine through the valley as they approached the edge of the forest. Suddenly, the giant wolf stopped walking. Emily took several more steps before noticing the silence behind her. She turned in quiet surprise. The wolf stood perfectly still, its silver eyes fixed upon the narrow trail ahead. Its ears lifted alertly, though its posture remained calm. Emily followed its gaze toward the shaded path, where nothing seemed unusual at first glance. Then, far beyond the trees, she caught the faint glimmer of polished silver armor moving silently between the branches, and before she could wonder who had entered the valley, the mysterious wolf stepped quietly in front of her, as though determined that whatever came next would reach him before it reached her. Emily Parker instinctively stopped walking the moment the giant black wolf stepped in front of her. Its broad shoulders formed a quiet barrier across the narrow forest trail, not with fear or aggression, but with calm determination. The afternoon breeze stirred the pine branches overhead, while tiny beams of golden sunlight filtered through the leaves, dancing across the soft earth beneath their feet. Emily looked past the wolf toward the distant flashes of polished silver she had noticed between the trees only moments before. Gradually, several riders emerged from the forest path. Their horses moved at a slow, disciplined pace, and each rider wore finely crafted silver armor beneath deep blue cloaks embroidered with an unfamiliar crest. The leader gently raised one hand, signaling the others to stop several yards away. "Please do not be alarmed," he called in a respectful voice. Emily nodded politely, though her curiosity continued to grow. Before she could answer, the giant wolf remained exactly where it stood, its silver eyes calmly fixed upon the approaching strangers. The leader noticed the animal immediately. His expression changed for the briefest moment before returning to careful composure. "Remarkable," he whispered almost to himself. Emily glanced toward him. "Do you know this wolf?" The rider hesitated before offering a courteous smile. "We know of a wolf that looks very much like him." Emily looked down at the great black companion standing faithfully beside her. "I have been trying to find his owner for 2 days." The rider slowly dismounted, taking great care not to move any closer than necessary. "May I ask," he said gently, "how long has he been following you?" Emily thought for a moment. "Since yesterday morning. I opened my front door, and he was waiting outside. Since then he has followed me everywhere." Several of the riders quietly exchanged surprised glances. One younger guard lowered his voice. "Exactly as the reports described." The leader gave him a subtle look before returning his attention to Emily. "Has he caused you any trouble?" Emily smiled warmly. "Quite the opposite. He watches over everyone. He keeps children away from the deeper parts of the river, never frightens anyone, and somehow always seems to know when someone needs help." The leader's thoughtful expression softened. "That sounds very much like him." Emily tilted her head. "Then you really do know him." The man looked toward the wolf again. "We have searched for someone like him across many valleys." The wolf quietly remained beside Emily, making no attempt to approach the riders. Instead, it calmly brushed its shoulder against Emily's arm before sitting beside her with complete confidence. The simple gesture caught everyone's attention. "Interesting," one rider murmured. "He chose her." Emily reached down and gently rested her hand upon the thick black fur. The wolf immediately relaxed beneath her touch, closing its silver eyes for just a moment. "He seems happiest when everything is peaceful," she said softly. The leader nodded slowly. "So it appears." After several moments of quiet conversation, the riders politely excused themselves and continued farther down the trail without another question. Yet Emily noticed that every one of them looked back at the wolf before disappearing among the pines. She watched until the forest grew silent once again. "That was strange," she admitted. The wolf slowly stood and resumed walking beside her as though nothing unusual had happened. Together they returned to the village just before sunset. News of the mysterious companion had already spread from one home to another. Shopkeepers smiled when Emily passed. Children eagerly waved at the giant wolf from their front yards. Even those who had once seemed uncertain now spoke more with curiosity than fear. One elderly woman carrying a basket of apples smiled warmly. "Your quiet friend has become the most talked-about visitor our village has ever seen." Emily laughed softly. "I believe he enjoys the attention much less than everyone else does." As evening settled over the valley, Emily prepared a simple supper inside her cottage. Through the open window, she could see the giant wolf resting beneath the familiar maple tree, its silver eyes quietly watching the fading colors of the sky. She carried a fresh bowl of water outside and placed it beside him. "I met some unusual travelers today," she said while sitting on the porch steps. "They acted as though they had been searching for you for a very long time." The wolf looked toward her but gave no answer beyond a gentle, thoughtful gaze. Emily smiled. "Whatever secret you are keeping, I hope it is not too lonely." The wolf slowly rested its great head near her feet, and she absent-mindedly stroked the soft fur behind one ear while the first evening stars appeared overhead. Neither of them noticed that high upon a distant ridge overlooking the peaceful village, another group of mounted riders had quietly arrived beneath fluttering royal banners. and at their center stood an older commander whose eyes widened the instant he recognized the silver collar resting against the neck of the great black wolf. The following morning arrived wrapped in cool mountain mist, and Emily Parker stepped onto her porch carrying a small basket of fresh bread as she did every sunrise. Before she could even look toward the old maple tree, she already knew the giant black wolf would be there. Somehow its quiet presence had become as familiar as the morning birds or the scent of pine drifting through the valley. Sure enough, the great wolf slowly stood and greeted her with calm silver eyes that reflected the soft light of dawn. Emily smiled warmly. "I was beginning to wonder if you ever sleep anywhere else." The wolf gave a slow blink before walking beside her toward the garden fence. She laughed quietly. "I will take that as a no." After watering her vegetables and gathering herbs, Emily noticed unusual movement along the distant road leading into the village. Several elegant horses approached at a measured pace, their polished armor shining beneath the rising sun. Unlike the travelers from the previous afternoon, these riders carried magnificent silver banners embroidered with the royal crest. Villagers gradually stepped outside their homes, whispering with growing curiosity as the procession entered the quiet square. The giant wolf immediately stopped walking. Its ears lifted, and its attention settled upon the approaching riders with complete stillness. Emily gently rested one hand against its shoulder. "Do you know them?" she asked softly. The wolf remained silent, but it did not step away from her. Instead, it calmly moved until it stood directly beside her, as though making its choice without hesitation. The leader of the royal escort slowly dismounted. He was an older man with fair skin, neatly combed silver hair, and calm blue eyes that carried years of quiet responsibility. The instant his gaze fell upon the wide leather collar surrounding the wolf's neck, his expression changed from careful professionalism to unmistakable relief. He lowered his head respectfully before speaking. "After many weeks, we have finally found him." Emily looked between the commander and the wolf with growing confusion. "You truly know who he is?" The commander nodded slowly. There was no growling, no threatening posture, only an unmistakable refusal to leave her side. The commander immediately lifted one hand, signaling every guard to stop where they stood. "Do not force him," he said calmly. "He has made his wishes perfectly clear." Emily looked down at the wolf with gentle surprise. "You do not want to go with them?" The wolf simply remained beside her, its silver eyes meeting hers with complete trust. The commander released a thoughtful breath. "Remarkable." Emily folded her hands politely. "Could someone please explain what is happening?" The commander smiled kindly. "I believe the explanation belongs to him when the time is right." Emily looked puzzled. "Him?" The older man glanced toward the wolf once more. "Until then, I ask only one favor." "What is it?" "Please continue treating him exactly as you already have." Emily blinked. "That is all. That is all." She smiled softly. "That is very easy." The commander looked genuinely grateful. "Thank you." Before returning to his horse, he carefully approached no closer than several yards from the wolf. He bowed deeply with quiet respect, then stepped back without another word. The villagers watched the remarkable scene in complete silence. None of them had ever seen royal officers bow before a simple animal. The procession slowly departed, leaving behind nothing but drifting dust and unanswered questions. Emily looked toward the wolf again. "You certainly know how to make ordinary days complicated." The wolf responded by gently brushing its shoulder against hers, and she laughed despite herself. "I suppose we are still keeping your secret." Throughout the afternoon, the village buzzed with speculation. Some believed the wolf belonged to the royal family. Others guessed it had once protected an ancient castle. Children invented fantastic stories with every passing hour. Emily ignored every rumor. She spent the afternoon repairing a broken fence, gathering herbs, and feeding chickens while the giant wolf quietly followed a few steps behind exactly as it always had. As evening settled across the valley, the sky turned shades of gold and violet above the mountains. Emily sat upon the porch holding a warm cup of tea while the wolf rested peacefully at her feet. She smiled down at him. "Whatever your story may be, I hope you know you are welcome here for as long as you need." The wolf slowly lifted its head, and for just one brief moment the silver light in its eyes seemed to glow more brightly beneath the rising full moon. Far beyond the village, hidden among the trees, The royal commander quietly watched the moon climbing into the night sky before whispering to Captain Nathan Holloway standing beside him. By tomorrow night, the kingdom will finally understand why His Majesty refused to leave her side. The full moon slowly climbed above the quiet valley, covering the little village in soft silver light that shimmered across rooftops, pine trees, and the peaceful stream beyond Emily Parker's cottage. She finished washing the last wooden bowl from supper before opening the front door to check on the giant black wolf resting beneath the old maple tree. As always, the great animal lifted its head the moment she appeared, its familiar silver eyes reflecting the moonlight with unusual brilliance. Emily smiled warmly. "You always seem happiest when the moon is full," she whispered as she carried a folded blanket outside. "The night is getting colder." She spread the blanket across the grass, even though she suspected the thick black fur hardly needed the extra warmth. The wolf quietly watched her every movement, remaining perfectly still while she arranged the blanket beneath the tree. "There," she said with quiet satisfaction. "Now you have somewhere a little more comfortable to rest." She reached out naturally and gently brushed a few fallen leaves from the wolf's shoulder. The instant her fingers touched the soft black fur, a faint silver glow shimmered beneath the moonlight. Emily blinked in surprise. The light slowly spread around the great wolf like gentle mist, growing brighter with every passing heartbeat. She instinctively stepped back, not because she was frightened, but because she realized something extraordinary was happening. The silver light surrounded the wolf completely before slowly fading into the cool night air. When the glow finally disappeared, the giant black wolf was no longer resting beneath the maple tree. In his place knelt a tall man with fair white skin, dark hair falling neatly to his shoulders, and calm silver eyes that Emily recognized immediately. Those eyes had watched over her since the first morning she opened her door. Those same gentle eyes now looked at her with quiet gratitude. Neither of them spoke for several moments. The peaceful sounds of crickets filled the silence while the moonlight illuminated the little garden around them. Finally, the man lowered his head respectfully. "I owe you an apology," he said in a warm, steady voice. "I should have told you the truth sooner." Emily remained perfectly calm, studying his face before smiling softly. "I knew there was a story behind those eyes." The man looked genuinely surprised. "You are not afraid?" Emily slowly shook her head. "No, you never gave me a reason to be." A quiet smile appeared across his face, one that carried both relief and deep appreciation. "My name is Adrian Sterling." Emily repeated it softly. "Adrian." He nodded. "I am the Alpha King." The words settled gently into the quiet night, yet Emily felt no shock, only understanding. The mysterious riders, the respectful bows, the silver collar, and the unwavering loyalty of the giant wolf suddenly formed one complete picture. She looked at him for another long moment before asking the first question that entered her heart. "Have you been sleeping beneath that tree every night because you wanted to protect me?" Adrian looked down briefly before answering with complete honesty. "Yes." Emily smiled with quiet affection. "You could have simply knocked on the door." Adrian laughed softly, the sound carrying a warmth that had been missing from his life for many years. "I considered it many times." She folded her arms playfully. "Then why did you never do it?" His silver eyes met hers. "Because I feared that once you knew who I truly was, you would no longer look at me the way you always did." Emily looked puzzled. "How did I look at you?" Adrian answered almost immediately, as someone worth caring about before knowing anything else. His voice became quieter. "Very few people have ever done that." Emily stepped a little closer until they stood only a few feet apart beneath the maple tree. "Adrian," she said gently, "I never cared whether you were a king, a traveler, or simply a lonely wolf looking for a place to rest. I only saw someone who needed kindness." Adrian closed his eyes briefly as though those simple words lifted a burden he had carried for countless years. "That is exactly why I stayed," he admitted. "Every place I visited reminded me of responsibility. Yours was the first place that felt like home." Before either of them could speak again, quiet footsteps approached along the garden path. Captain Nathan Holloway emerged from the shadows with several royal guards waiting respectfully behind him. The captain lowered one knee before Adrian. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "the council has arrived. They request your return before sunrise." Adrian remained standing beside Emily, his calm silver eyes never leaving hers as the peaceful valley waited for the choice only a king could make. Morning arrived gently after the remarkable night beneath the maple tree. Golden sunlight filtered through the cottage windows while birds filled the valley with cheerful songs, making it almost impossible to believe that the mysterious wolf who had quietly followed Emily Parker everywhere was now sitting across from her as Adrian Sterling, the Alpha King himself. Emily placed 2 simple bowls of oatmeal on the small wooden table before smiling with quiet satisfaction. I hope kings do not expect grand breakfasts every morning. Adrian looked at the humble meal before meeting her eyes with a warm smile. After everything I have experienced, this already feels like a feast. Emily laughed softly. That is fortunate because my cooking has never impressed anyone except the village chickens. Adrian chuckled, and the sound surprised even him. It had been years since laughter had come so naturally. They shared breakfast while sunlight warmed the little kitchen, speaking not as a king and an omega, but as 2 people discovering how peaceful ordinary conversation could be. Emily spoke about the changing seasons, her herb garden, and the elderly neighbors she often helped. Adrian listened with genuine interest, asking quiet questions that no court advisor would have expected from their ruler. When breakfast ended, Emily carried a basket into the garden. The tomatoes need support before they grow any taller, she explained. Adrian immediately stood. Show me what to do. Emily raised an amused eyebrow. You still wish to help after yesterday's lesson in cooking? Adrian smiled. Gardening cannot possibly be more difficult. Several minutes later, he accidentally tied one climbing vine to the wrong wooden stake. Emily gently untangled it before laughing. Perhaps we should say you are enthusiastic rather than experienced. Adrian accepted the correction with surprising humility. That sounds kinder than saying I have no idea what I am doing. Together, they spent the morning working beneath the clear blue sky. Emily gathered herbs while Adrian repaired a loose fence beside the vegetable beds. Every small task felt strangely meaningful because neither of them hurried. For the first time in many years, Adrian experienced hours that belonged to no royal schedule, no formal ceremony, and no endless list of responsibilities. Captain Nathan Holloway quietly observed from the edge of the property, with several royal guards waiting nearby. One young guard looked toward the cottage in disbelief. His Majesty has been smiling all morning. Nathan folded his arms thoughtfully. Sometimes a kingdom is strengthened not inside its palace, but in the place where its ruler remembers how to be human. Near noon, the peaceful rhythm changed as elegant royal carriages appeared once again along the village road. Members of the royal council stepped down, dressed in formal robes that contrasted sharply with the simple countryside around them. The eldest advisor approached with respectful composure before bowing deeply. Your Majesty, the council humbly requests your immediate return to the capital. Matters of state cannot wait much longer. Adrian thanked him with a gentle nod, but did not immediately answer. Instead, he looked toward Emily, who was quietly watering flowers beside the cottage fence. She pretended not to listen, hoping he would never feel forced to choose between duty and the peace he had finally found. Adrian slowly walked toward her. Emily. She looked up with a calm smile. Yes. If I return today, everything will become very different again. Emily set the watering can aside. You have people who depend on you. Adrian nodded. That is true. She met his silver eyes with quiet understanding. Then they deserve the same kindness you have shown me. Adrian remained silent for a long moment before speaking softly. Would you come with me? Emily blinked in surprise. To the capital? Not because you must, he answered gently. Because I do not want the place that finally felt like home to disappear from my life. Emily looked around her little garden, the old maple tree, the tiny cottage, and the familiar mountain valley she had always known. Then she looked back at Adrian, whose expression carried hope instead of command. A warm smile slowly appeared across her face. If I come, she said quietly, you must promise me something. Adrian smiled. Anything. No matter how large the palace is, you still have to help in the garden sometimes. Adrian laughed with genuine happiness. I gladly accept those terms. From a short distance away, the members of the royal council exchanged surprised but approving smiles. They had expected to witness a king returning to his throne. Instead, they watched a ruler rediscover the quiet humility that would make him worthy of it. and every one of them understood that the journey back to the capital had already changed the future of the kingdom. The royal procession left the quiet mountain village just after sunrise, moving at an unhurried pace along roads lined with towering pines and fields covered in wildflowers. Emily Parker sat beside Adrian Sterling inside the lead carriage, still adjusting to the extraordinary path her life had taken. Through the open window, she watched familiar hills slowly disappear behind them, while cool spring air carried the comforting scent of cedar and fresh grass. Adrian noticed the thoughtful expression on her face. "Are you wondering if you made the right decision?" Emily smiled softly. "I was wondering whether my little herb garden will forgive me for leaving without saying goodbye." Adrian laughed quietly. "When we return, I believe it will welcome you exactly as it always has." Emily looked toward him with gentle amusement. "You already speak as though we will visit often." Adrian answered without hesitation. "Because we will." His certainty carried no royal authority, only sincere promise. Several hours later, the magnificent towers of the capital appeared beyond the hills, their white stone walls glowing beneath the afternoon sun. As the procession entered the city gates, thousands of citizens lined the streets. Colorful banners fluttered from every balcony, while musicians filled the air with joyful melodies. Emily had never seen so many smiling faces gathered in one place. She instinctively leaned back slightly inside the carriage. "I do not think I belong in front of all these people." Adrian gently shook his head. "You belong wherever kindness has led you." The carriage stopped before the grand palace where rows of royal guards stood in polished silver armor. Members of the royal council waited upon the marble staircase along with respected leaders from every province. As Adrian stepped onto the courtyard, every voice fell silent. He turned and offered his hand toward Emily. She accepted it with a quiet breath before joining him beneath the warm afternoon light. The eldest council member stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the kingdom rejoices at your return." Adrian thanked him before looking across the assembled crowd. His silver eyes were calm, yet every word that followed carried unmistakable conviction. "Before any celebration begins, there is someone I wish every person gathered here to know." He gently turned toward Emily. "This is Emily Parker." Curious whispers spread across the courtyard. Many had expected a royal announcement concerning state affairs. None expected the humble Omega standing beside their king. Adrian continued. "When I wandered this land beneath an ancient curse, many people saw only a great wolf and turned away in fear or uncertainty. Emily never asked who I was. She never searched for a reward. She simply offered water, kindness, conversation, and a place where I no longer felt alone." The courtyard became completely silent. Adrian's voice softened. "She reminded me that a ruler cannot truly guide a kingdom without first remembering compassion." Emily looked down modestly, wishing the attention would return to Adrian instead. The king gently smiled before addressing the gathered citizens once more. "Many of you believe strength is measured by power. I stand before you today because one ordinary act of kindness proved that belief incomplete." Captain Nathan Holloway stepped forward and respectfully lowered one knee before Emily. Without hesitation, every royal guard followed. Moments later, the members of the council did the same. The sound of countless knees touching polished stone echoed through the courtyard. Emily's eyes widened with surprise. "Please," she said softly, "there is no need for this." Nathan looked up with a warm smile. "There is every reason." One by one, the citizens watching from beyond the palace gates placed a hand over their hearts in quiet gratitude. No command had been given. Respect had simply spread naturally from one person to another. Adrian looked at Emily with unmistakable pride. "You once asked why a wolf followed you everywhere." Emily smiled through grateful tears. "Yes." Adrian's silver eyes reflected the bright afternoon sky. "Because I finally found someone who saw me before she ever saw a crown." A gentle breeze carried the palace banners across the courtyard while the gathered kingdom witnessed not merely the return of its alpha king, but the public honor given to the humble Omega, whose quiet compassion had changed the heart of their ruler forever. The days that followed transformed the royal palace in ways no architect or advisor could have imagined. The grand halls remained magnificent. The marble floors still reflected the morning sunlight, and the silver banners continued to hang proudly from every tower. Yet a quiet warmth now filled places that had once felt distant and formal. Emily Parker never tried to become someone different simply because she lived within palace walls. Each morning she still visited the palace gardens before breakfast, greeting every gardener by name while carefully checking herbs, flowers, and young fruit trees. Adrian Sterling often joined her long before the official duties of the day began. Dressed in simple clothing instead of ceremonial robes, he helped carry watering buckets, repaired wooden garden frames, and listened patiently as Emily explained which herbs preferred morning shade and which flowers bloomed best after gentle rain. The gardeners smiled whenever they watched their king working beside them without pride or ceremony. One elderly gardener quietly whispered, "His Majesty looks happier holding a shovel than sitting upon the throne." Another answered with a warm laugh. Perhaps that is exactly why he deserves the throne. Throughout the kingdom, stories spread from village to village. Travelers repeated the remarkable tale of the mysterious wolf who had quietly followed an omega through forests, marketplaces, and quiet country roads before the entire kingdom discovered that the faithful companion had been the Alpha King himself. Parents shared the story with their children before bedtime, not because it spoke about royalty, but because it reminded them that kindness should always come before judgment. Emily found the growing attention slightly embarrassing. One afternoon, she entered the palace library hoping for a peaceful hour among the books, only to discover several young visitors waiting politely near the entrance. A little girl stepped forward holding a tiny bouquet of wildflowers. "My mother said you always helped people before you knew who they were," she said shyly. "I want to be like that too." Emily accepted the flowers with gentle gratitude. "Then you already know the most important place to begin," she replied. The child smiled brightly before returning to her family. Adrian had quietly witnessed the exchange from across the room. When the visitors departed, he walked beside Emily through the long gallery overlooking the palace gardens. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, filling the hallway with warm golden light. "You have changed this kingdom without ever trying to," he said softly. Emily smiled modestly. "I only treated one lonely traveler the way I hoped someone would treat me." Adrian looked toward the distant mountains visible beyond the palace walls. "That simple choice changed far more than you realize." During the next royal council meeting, representatives from every province gathered beneath the great domed ceiling. Many expected discussions about trade, roads, and harvests. Adrian addressed them with calm confidence. "Today we begin something new." Curious silence settled across the chamber. Every village will receive support to build welcoming rest houses for travelers, safe gathering places for families, and community gardens where neighbors may help one another freely. Several advisors exchanged approving smiles. Adrian continued, "Strength is measured not only by strong walls or prosperous markets, but by the kindness people offer one another every ordinary day." The proposal received unanimous support. Weeks later, the first projects were already underway throughout the kingdom. Emily accompanied Adrian on many of those visits, not as a royal symbol, but as the same compassionate woman who had once welcomed a mysterious wolf without asking a single question. Everywhere they traveled, people greeted them with genuine smiles instead of distant formality. One peaceful evening, they returned to the small mountain village where everything had begun. Emily walked slowly toward her little cottage, finding it exactly as she had left it. The old maple tree still spread its branches across the yard, birds still nested among its leaves, and the porch still creaked gently beneath familiar footsteps. Adrian stood quietly beside her. "It still feels like home," he said. Emily nodded. "Some places never stop waiting for us." Adrian smiled before gently taking her hand. "Neither do some people." As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, the evening breeze carried the scent of pine through the valley once again. Villagers smiled from their windows as they watched the Alpha King and the humble Omega walking side by side beneath the old maple tree, knowing that the greatest truth their kingdom had ever learned was not hidden beneath a crown or inside an ancient legend, but within the quiet decision to choose compassion before ever asking who someone truly was. 1 year later, the first light of spring spread gently across the kingdom, turning fields of wildflowers into ribbons of gold beneath the morning sun. Travelers filled the roads with cheerful conversation, merchants crossed from village to village with confidence, and children laughed freely in places that had once seemed distant from one another. Many people believed the kingdom had simply entered a fortunate new season. Those who remembered the old stories knew something deeper had changed. Emily Parker stood once again outside her little mountain cottage, smiling as the familiar scent of pine drifted through the cool morning air. Although the royal palace had become another home, she still returned often to the quiet valley where everything had begun. The old maple tree remained beside the porch exactly as she remembered it, its broad branches offering gentle shade across the soft grass. She set down a basket filled with fresh herbs before looking toward the forest trail. A quiet smile appeared before anyone else arrived. Moments later, Adrian Sterling emerged from between the tall pines, dressed in simple traveling clothes instead of royal robes. He carried no crown, no ceremonial cloak, and no grand escort. Only Captain Nathan Holloway waited respectfully farther down the trail, allowing the king a peaceful morning without interruption. Adrian smiled the moment he saw Emily. "I had a feeling you would come before I did." Emily laughed softly. "You only say that because you know I cannot stay away from this place for very long." Adrian looked around the peaceful clearing. "Neither can I." Together they walked slowly through the village where familiar neighbors greeted them with warm smiles instead of formal bows. To the people who had watched the story unfold from the very beginning, Adrian would always be remembered not only as the Alpha King, but also as the quiet black wolf who had patiently waited outside one small cottage because kindness had given him the courage to trust again. Children ran happily across the village square until one little boy stopped beside Adrian with wide, curious eyes. "Is it true," he asked shyly, "that you used to follow her everywhere?" Adrian looked toward Emily before answering with an amused smile. "Yes." The boy laughed. "Why?" Adrian gently rested one hand upon the child's shoulder. "Because sometimes the safest place in the world is wherever a kind heart happens to be." The child nodded thoughtfully before racing away to repeat the answer to his friends. Emily smiled as she watched them disappear across the meadow. "I think they like your version better than all the old legends." Adrian chuckled. "So do I." Later that afternoon, the villagers gathered beneath the maple tree for a simple spring celebration. Long wooden tables overflowed with homemade bread, fresh fruit, warm soup, and garden vegetables. Musicians played cheerful melodies while families shared stories beneath strings of lanterns swaying gently in the breeze. No one treated Adrian differently because he was king, and he quietly cherished every ordinary conversation. He helped an elderly carpenter repair a loose bench, carried baskets for a farmer, and laughed with children chasing butterflies across the grass. Emily watched him with quiet pride. The lonely ruler who had once hidden behind the silent eyes of a wolf now smiled as naturally as anyone else in the village. As evening settled across the valley, golden light slowly faded into a sky filled with brilliant stars. Emily and Adrian walked together toward the hill overlooking the cottage where everything had begun. Below them, the little village glowed warmly beneath the lanterns while the forest whispered softly in the night breeze. Adrian looked toward the maple tree where he had once spent countless quiet nights waiting without knowing whether he would ever truly belong anywhere. "I used to believe I was searching for a place," he said softly. Emily gently slipped her hand into his. "And what did you find?" Adrian looked at her with the same calm silver eyes that had first met hers outside the cottage door. "A person who made every place feel like home." Emily smiled as the peaceful silence settled comfortably between them. Far below, the laughter of the villagers drifted gently through the evening air, carrying with it a happiness shared by an entire kingdom. In time, people would tell many versions of the story about the mysterious wolf who followed an omega through forests, markets, gardens, and quiet country roads until everyone learned he was the Alpha King. Yet those who truly understood the tale always remembered its simplest truth. The greatest secret had never been hidden beneath dark fur or behind a royal title. It had lived inside one ordinary act of kindness that asked for nothing in return, proving forever that hearts are never won by power alone, but by compassion freely given, faithfully remembered, and quietly returned.